The ships came without warning. They filled the sky like a dark cloud, blocking the orange sun of Meridian 7. Commander Cale Vasquez stood outside the colony's main building and watched them descend. His heart beat fast, but his face showed nothing. A leader could not show fear. The Vethkai had arrived. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Vethkai. They were an ancient species, old when humans were still living in caves. They looked like giant insects, standing on four legs with two arms that ended in sharp claws. Their heads were triangular, covered in hard shell, with large compound eyes that saw everything. When they spoke, their mandibles clicked together in patterns that sounded like stones hitting each other. The colony had 3,000 people. Farmers, scientists, engineers, teachers, children. They had come to Meridian 7 5 years ago to build a new home. They had worked hard. They had built power plants and factories and farms. They had made something good on this difficult world. Now the Vethkai were going to take it all away. The largest ship landed in the center of the colony. Its door opened and 50 Vethkai soldiers marched out. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. Behind them came the Overseer, a Vethkai even larger than the others. His shell was darker, almost black, and golden marks covered his chest. "I am Overseer Kethrix," he said through a small device that translated his clicking speech into human words. "Your colony has violated Territorial Expansion Protocol 7. You built on a world claimed by the Empire. The punishment is total confiscation." Cale stepped forward. "We received approval from the Galactic Council. We have the documents." "The Council's authority does not extend to Vethkai space," Kethrix replied. His compound eyes showed no emotion. "Your approval means nothing. The punishment will proceed." And so it began. The Vethkai soldiers moved through the colony like a wave of destruction. They took everything. The fusion reactors that gave them power were loaded onto cargo ships. The fabrication units that built their tools were carried away. The medical equipment that kept them healthy, the agricultural machines that grew their food, the vehicles that moved their supplies. All of it gone, but they did not stop there. They took the hand tools, the wrenches and hammers and screwdrivers. They took the computers and tablets and communication devices. They took the kitchen appliances and the construction equipment and the scientific instruments. They even took the children's educational tablets. Dr. Yumi Tanaka, the colony's chief scientist, tried to protest when they entered her laboratory. "These are research materials," she said. "Scientific knowledge belongs to all species. Surely you came out." A Vethkai soldier pushed her aside without a word. They took everything. Every microscope, every sample container, every piece of equipment she had spent years gathering. Cale watched it all happen. He helped when people fell. He calmed them when they cried. He stopped a young man who wanted to fight, because fighting would only get them killed. The Vethkai had weapons that could turn a human to ash in seconds. Resistance was not possible. The stripping took 3 days. When it was finished, the colony looked like a skeleton. The buildings remained, but they were empty shells. The prefabricated walls stood bare, stripped of every wire, every pipe, every fixture. The colonists had nothing but the clothes they wore and 60 days of emergency food rations that the Vethkai had left behind. Not out of kindness, out of cruelty. They wanted the humans to have just enough hope to make their suffering last longer. Overseer Kethrix stood before Cale one final time. Around them, colonists wept and held each other. Children asked their parents what would happen now. No one had answers. "You may petition the Empire for resupply in 1 standard galactic year," Kethrix said. "If any of you remain alive, we will survive," Cale said. His voice was steady. Kethrix made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species is young and foolish. You do not understand what you face. This world has poor soil and harsh seasons. Without technology, you cannot grow enough food. Without medicine, your sick will die. Without power, your machines are useless metal. He leaned closer, and Kale could smell the strange chemical scent of the alien's body. Without technology, humans are nothing. Weak creatures with soft skin and slow bodies. You will die here, Commander. All of you. And when we return, we will find only bones. He turned and walked back to his ship. One by one, the Vethkai vessels rose into the sky. They grew smaller and smaller until they were just points of light. Then they jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished completely. The colonists stood in silence for a long time. Then the crying started. People fell to their knees. Some screamed at the empty sky. Some sat down and stared at nothing, their minds unable to accept what had happened. Dr. Tanaka found Kale standing alone, looking at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It was beautiful. It was also a reminder that another day had passed, that their 60 days of food had become 59. They expect us to die, she said quietly. Yes, Kale agreed. Can we survive? Tell me honestly. Kale was silent for a moment. He thought about his people. He thought about what they had lost. He thought about what they still had. The Vethkai made a mistake, he finally said. They took our machines. They took our tools. They took everything we built. He turned to look at her, and she was surprised to see a fire in his eyes. But they left the most important thing. They left us. I don't understand. The Vethkai are old, Yumi. Very old. They found good technology thousands of years ago, and they stopped improving. They stopped learning. They think that without machines, a species is helpless. He shook his head slowly. They don't understand humans at all. Then tell me what they don't understand. Kale looked back at the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the Vethkai were laughing about the foolish humans they had left to die. Somewhere up there, they were already forgetting about Meridian-7. They had no idea what they had just started. Humans made those machines, Kale said. We invented them. We built them with our minds and our hands. The Vethkai think technology is power. They're wrong. Knowledge is power. And knowledge. He tapped his head. Knowledge is something they could never take away. He started walking toward the main building. Dr. Tanaka followed. Tomorrow, we begin, he said. Tomorrow, we show the universe what happens when you try to destroy humanity. The first week after the Vethkai left was the worst time in the colony's history. People wandered through empty buildings like ghosts. They looked at the places where machines used to stand. They touched the walls where wires used to run. They could not believe that everything was gone. 3 people took their own lives during that week. They could not see any hope. They could not imagine surviving without the technology they had always depended on. Kale attended their funerals and spoke words of comfort, but inside he felt the same fear that had killed them. He just refused to let it win. On the 8th day, he called everyone together in the main hall. It was the largest building in the colony, and now it was completely empty. No chairs, no screens, no lights except for the sunlight coming through the windows. 3,000 people packed inside, standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear what their commander would say. Kale climbed onto a platform made of stacked crates. He looked out at the faces before him. He saw fear. He saw despair. He saw people who had given up. But he also saw something else in a few eyes. A small spark. A refusal to accept death. He would make that spark into a fire. The Vethkai took our machines, he began. His voice was calm and clear. They took our tools, our equipment, our technology. They left us with nothing but empty buildings and enough food for 60 days. They expect us to die. No one spoke. A baby cried somewhere in the back of the crowd. They expect us to die, Kale repeated, because they do not understand what humans really are. He reached up and tapped his forehead. The Vethkai think power comes from machines. They are wrong. Power comes from here. From knowledge. From the 10,000 years of learning that every human carries in their mind. He pointed to a man in the crowd. Marcus Webb, before you joined the colony, what did you do for fun? Marcus was a large man with thick arms and rough hands. He looked surprised to be called out. I was a blacksmith, he said. Old style. It was a hobby. You know how to work metal with fire and hammer. I do. Then you can teach others. Kale pointed to another person. Elena Vasquez. You're our lead botanist. Can you identify which plants on this world are safe to eat? Elena nodded slowly. I've been studying the native species for years. Some are edible. Some can even be cultivated. Then you can save us from starvation. Kale pointed to an old man near the front. Dmitry Volkov. You grew up in rural Russia. Tell me, do you remember how your grandmother made soap? Dmitry laughed, but it was not a happy sound. From animal fat and wood ash. Yes, I remember. I never thought I would need to know such a thing again. Now you will teach others. Kale turned in a circle, looking at everyone. I don't need machines to survive. I need knowledge. And knowledge is the one thing the Vethkai could not take from us. He raised his voice. Our ancestors survived ice ages without any technology at all. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They built cities from mud and stone. They invented farming, writing, medicine, and 1,000 other things. All without computers. All without power plants. All with nothing but their minds and their hands. He let the words settle over the crowd. Some people were still crying, but others were standing straighter. Others were beginning to understand. The Vethkai have been flying through space for 100,000 years. They forgot what it means to struggle. They forgot what it means to fight for survival. They think that because we are young, we are weak. Kale shook his head. They have no idea how wrong they are. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. I worked with the commander last night, she said. We made a list of every skill we might need. Now we need to find people who have those skills. She began reading from a paper she had written by hand. Farming without machines. Building with natural materials. Making fire. Preserving food. Working metal. Working wood. Making cloth. Making medicine. And dozens more. For each skill, hands went up in the crowd. An elderly woman had grown up on a farm before machines did all the work. A teenager had studied ancient history and knew how Romans built their roads. A retired engineer had studied how humans first made steel. A mother had learned pottery from her grandmother. A man who seemed shy admitted that he knew how to tan animal hides into leather. Every skill humanity had ever developed existed somewhere in the crowd. It was scattered, broken into pieces, but it was there. All they had to do was put it back together. In the days that followed, teams formed around the people with knowledge. Marcus Webb took charge of metalworking. He found clay deposits where they could build kilns. He located rocks that contained iron ore. He showed young volunteers how to make charcoal by burning wood slowly without air. Elena Vasquez led groups into the wilderness. They returned with samples of plants, carefully labeled and sorted. Some were poisonous. Some were useless. But some could become food, and Elena found them all. Old Dmitry became unexpectedly important. He remembered things that most people had forgotten. How to make rope from plant fibers. How to waterproof cloth with animal fat. How to build simple machines that used water and wind for power instead of electricity. Dr. Tanaka organized everything. She created a knowledge repository, interviewing every person in the colony. Every skill was recorded. Every memory was written down before it could be lost. She assigned students to the people with knowledge, making sure that what one person knew would spread to many. Kale moved between all the groups, encouraging and directing. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the overseer's face. He heard the clicking laughter. He felt the weight of 3,000 lives on his shoulders. But slowly, day by day, things began to change. By the end of the second week, the first kill was burning. By the third week, they had produced crude metal tools. They were ugly and simple, but they worked. A woman cut wood with an axe made entirely from materials found on Meridian 7. She held it up like a trophy, and everyone cheered. They were not going to die. They were going to fight. At night, Kale stood on a hill overlooking the colony. Fires burned in the darkness below, not for work. People were making things, building things, remembering skills that humanity had left behind, and finding new pride in old knowledge. Dr. Tanaka joined him. "We might actually survive," she said. There was wonder in her voice. "Survival is not enough?" Kale replied. "What do you mean?" He turned to look at her. In the firelight, his eyes were bright with a fierce determination. "When the Vethkai return, I don't want them to find survivors. I want them to find something that terrifies them. I want them to understand that they made the biggest mistake of their existence when they decided to challenge humanity." Dr. Tanaka smiled slowly. "What do you have in mind?" "Everything," Kale said. "We're going to rebuild everything they took. And then we're going to build more, better, superior." He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vethkai Empire spread across 1,000 worlds. They were ancient and powerful and completely certain that they had destroyed this little colony. They had no idea what was coming. 3 months had passed since the stripping. The colony of Meridian 7 had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible on that dark first day. Where there had been despair, there was now purpose. Where there had been empty buildings, there was now constant activity. Marcus Webb stood before a blazing forge, watching molten metal glow orange in the firelight. Sweat ran down his face, but he was smiling. Behind him, 12 apprentices worked at their own smaller forges, learning the art that he had once practiced only for pleasure. "The temperature is everything," he told them for the 100th time. "Too cold and the metal won't shape. Too hot and it becomes weak. You have to feel it. You have to understand the metal like it's alive." The first tools they had made were ugly and crude. They broke easily. They bent when they should have stayed straight. But with each failure came learning, and with each lesson came improvement. Now, 3 months later, they were producing steel that actually deserved the name. The journey from stone to steel had taken humanity thousands of years. The colonists had done it in weeks. They did not need to discover anything new. They already knew that certain rocks contained iron, that certain temperatures produced certain results, that adding the right amount of carbon made metal stronger. The knowledge existed in books and memories, in the accumulated wisdom of a species that had once climbed out of caves and built starships. All they had to do was remember. Elena Vasquez walked through the first greenhouse, checking plants that had not existed in this form a month ago. She had crossbred native species with the emergency seeds from the colony's survival supplies. The result was a hardy vegetable that could grow in Meridian 7's poor soil and survive its harsh seasons. It would never win any prizes for taste, but it would keep people alive. "The next harvest will be bigger," she told Kale as he made his morning inspection. "We've learned which additives the soil needs. We found bacteria in the northern valley that fix nitrogen naturally. We're adding them to every plot. How much food can we produce?" Kale asked. "By month 6, we'll be self-sufficient. By month 9, we'll have surplus." She smiled with quiet pride. "We won't need their resupply. We won't need anything from them." Everywhere Kale looked, he saw miracles happening. A team of engineers had built a water wheel in the river that ran past the colony. It powered a series of trip hammers that could shape metal faster than any human arm. The constant boom 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 of the hammers had become the heartbeat of the colony, a sound that meant progress, that meant hope. A group of chemists had set up a laboratory in one of the empty buildings. They had no fancy equipment, just clay vessels and hand-blown glass tubes and fires of carefully controlled temperature. But they were producing chemicals that the colony desperately needed. Medicines, fertilizers, acids for etching metal. Children had become workers. Not in a cruel way, but because everyone needed to contribute. They sorted materials, carried messages, helped with simple tasks that freed adults for more complex work. They also attended school for 4 hours each day, because Kale insisted that education could not stop. "Knowledge saved us," he said. "Knowledge will lift us higher. We will not raise a generation of children who cannot read and think." Dr. Tanaka managed the colony's growing knowledge base. She had organized everything into a system with teachers assigned to every critical skill. If Marcus Webb fell ill, 3 of his apprentices could continue his work. If Elena Vasquez had an accident, her assistants knew everything she knew. No single person's death would stop their progress. But Kale wanted more than survival. He wanted revenge, not violent revenge. Something better. He wanted to make the Vethkai feel small. He wanted them to look at what humanity could do and feel afraid. "Show me the next phase," he said to Chun, the colony's chief engineer. Chun was a thin man with tired eyes and clever hands. He unrolled a sheet of paper covered in hand-drawn diagrams. The paper itself had been made in the colony, from plant fibers pulped and dried. Even their paper was their own creation. "Precision manufacturing," Chun said. "Right now, we can make good tools. But good isn't enough for complex machinery. We need to cut metal to exact measurements. We need screws and gears and bearings that fit together perfectly. Can we do it? We're building a lathe right now. Hand-powered, but accurate. Once we have that, we can make parts for a better lathe. Then those parts let us make an even better one." He tapped at the diagram. "Each generation improves on the last. Within 2 months, we'll have precision equipment that matches what the Vethkai took." Kale studied the drawings. He saw the plan unfolding in his mind. First, accurate tools. Then, complex machines. Then, electricity. Then, electronics. Each step building on the last, each achievement making the next one possible. "And after that?" he asked. Chun's eyes met his. "After that, we start making things the Vethkai have never seen." As the sun set that evening, Kale climbed the hill that had become his thinking place. The colony spread below him, transformed almost beyond recognition. Smoke rose from the forges. The greenhouse glowed with the soft light of carefully tended fires. The water wheel turned endlessly, powering machines that were making other machines. Dr. Tanaka joined him, as she often did. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their people work. "Do you think the Vethkai are watching us?" she asked. "Maybe, probably not. We're too unimportant to them. Will they be surprised when they return?" Kale smiled, and there was something fierce in it. Surprise doesn't begin to describe it. They think technology is something you find, something you take, something you have or you don't. They don't understand that for humans, technology is a process, a way of thinking. You can take our machines, but you can't take our ability to make new ones. He picked up a piece of metal from the ground. It was a gear, perfectly cut, precisely balanced. Chun's team had made it that morning. It was the first of its kind, proof that they had achieved the next level of manufacturing. "This gear," Kale said, "is just the beginning. In 6 more months, we'll have things that the Vethkai can't even imagine. Because we never stop improving. We never stop asking what if and why not, and how can we do this better. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us dangerous." He looked up at the stars, at the vast darkness where the Vethkai Empire spread across 1,000 worlds. "They wanted to teach us a lesson," he said quietly. "Instead, they've reminded us who we really are." Dr. Tanaka nodded. "I almost feel sorry for them." "Don't," Kale replied. "They earned what's coming." 6 months after the stripping, the colony no longer looked like a place struggling to survive. It looked like a place preparing for something big. The river had been changed. Engineers had built dams and channels that directed water into a series of mills and factories. The constant sound of rushing water mixed with the clatter of machinery. Wheels turned. Hammers fell. Automod. Gears mached together with smooth precision. Power flowed through the colony like blood through a body. The original hand forges were now museum pieces, kept as reminders of how far they had come. In their place stood proper foundries with blast furnaces that roared day and night. These furnaces produced steel of excellent quality, better than anything the colony had made before the Vethkai came. Not because of better machines, but because of better understanding. The colonists had studied the process. They had experimented. They had improved. Chun walked Kale through the main manufacturing building. It was loud inside, filled with the sounds of production. Workers operated lathes and mills and presses, cutting metal with incredible accuracy. Each machine had been built from parts made by earlier, simpler machines. It was like watching evolution happen in fast forward. "We achieved our precision targets last week," Chun said, nearly shouting over the noise. "Our tolerances are as good as the equipment the Vethkai took. In some cases, better. What's the next step?" Kale asked. Chun grinned. Electricity, the chemical laboratory, had become the heart of the colony's most ambitious project. Dr. Tanaka led a team of scientists who worked with materials found on Meridian 7. They had refined acids from mineral deposits. They had purified metals from local ores. They had built containers and wires and connections, using nothing but local resources and human knowledge. On day 187, they tested their first battery. It was a crude thing. A stack of metal plates in acid-filled chambers. It looked nothing like the elegant power cells the Vethkai had taken. But when Dr. Tanaka connected a wire to both ends, a small light flickered to life. Everyone in the room held their breath. The light was dim, barely visible in the daytime. But it was there. Electricity, power, the force that made complex technology possible. Someone cheered. Then everyone was cheering, hugging, crying with joy. They had done it. They had climbed another impossible mountain. Within weeks, they had built larger batteries. Within a month, they had constructed their first generator, a wheel driven by water that produced electrical current. Wires spread through the colony like growing vines, carrying power to every building. Lights came on. Not candles or oil lamps, but electric lights that turned night into day. Workers could now continue in the workshops after dark. Production doubled, then tripled. The colony that had faced extinction was now growing faster than ever before in its history. But Kale was not satisfied with matching what they had lost. He wanted more. He called a meeting of the colony's best minds. Chum was there, along with Dr. Tanaka and Elena and Marcus and a dozen others who had proven themselves over the past months. They gathered in a secure room, away from curious eyes. "The Vethkai will return in 6 months," Kale said. "They expect to find corpses. Instead, they'll find a thriving colony. That alone will shock them. He paused. But I want to do more than shock them. I want to terrify them. He unrolled a large sheet of paper on the table. It showed a design unlike anything the colonists had seen before. A vehicle of some kind, but strange and advanced. This is the beginning of a project I've been working on with Chun and Dr. Tanaka, Kale explained. The Vethkai have been a spacefaring species for 100,000 years. In that time, their technology has barely changed. They found solutions that worked, and they stopped looking for better ones. They are stagnant, and humans are not, Chun added. Exactly. We analyzed the wreckage from our old vehicles before the Vethkai took them. We understood the principles behind their systems. And we realized something important. Kale tapped the drawing. The Vethkai designs are inefficient. They work, but they're not optimized. There's room for massive improvement. Dr. Tanaka took over. We've been working on new designs. Theoretical at first, but now we're ready to build prototypes. If our calculations are correct, our drive systems will be 40% more efficient than anything the Vethkai have. Our power plants will be smaller and stronger. Our materials will be lighter and tougher. We're going to leapfrog them, Kale said. We're going to go from having nothing to having better than what they have. In 6 months, the room was silent. It was an insane goal. Impossible, really. The Vethkai had 100,000 years of development. Humanity had been in space for less than 300. Then Marcus Webb laughed. It was a big, booming laugh that filled the room. Why not? He said. We've already done the impossible. We went from stone tools to precision manufacturing in 3 months. We built an electrical grid from scratch. If you told me on day 1 that we'd be here now, I would have said you were crazy. He slapped the table. Let's build a starship. The project consumed everything. Every resource, every skilled worker, every waking hour went into making Kale's vision real. They built specialized factories to produce components. They developed new alloys using materials unique to Meridian 7. They created computer systems using a hybrid of mechanical and electronic parts. Simple by galactic standards, but perfectly suited to their needs. And slowly, in a secure building at the edge of the colony, a ship began to take shape. It was not large. It did not need to be. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration that humans could not just recover from disaster, but could use disaster as a springboard to something greater. As month 8 began, the first systems came online. Power flowed through circuits designed from scratch. Engines fired with a roar that shook the building. Kale stood in the control room, watching data scroll across screens that his people had built with their own hands. All systems nominal, Chun reported. Drive efficiency is 43% above Vethkai standard. Kale nodded slowly. They had not just matched their predictions. They had exceeded them. How? Dr. Tanaka whispered. How did we do this? Because we had to, Kale replied. Because the Vethkai told us it was impossible. And humans have never been able to resist proving someone wrong. He looked around the room at the tired, proud faces of his people. They had started with nothing. Less than nothing. They had been stripped of every tool, every resource, every advantage. And now they had built something that would change the galaxy. 2 more months, he said. When the Vethkai return, we'll be ready to give them the surprise of their very long lives. Overseer Kethrix watched Meridian 7 grow larger in the view screen. 1 standard galactic year had passed since he had stripped the human colony of everything they owned. He remembered the commander's eyes, the way the human had refused to show fear even as his world collapsed around him. A foolish pride, Kethrix had thought at the time. The pride of a species too young to understand its own weakness. Now, he was returning to collect the corpses, his ship carried a documentation team. The Vethkai liked to record their victories, to show other young species what happened to those who defied the Empire. The images of dead humans would serve as an excellent warning. Entering atmosphere, his pilot announced. Ketherick settled into his command chair. This would be a quick visit. Survey the bodies, record the evidence, file the report. Perhaps the humans had built a few primitive shelters before the end. Perhaps some had survived longer than others by eating their dead. Such things happened when inferior species faced extinction. "Overseer," his pilot said. There was something strange in his voice. "I think you should see this." Ketherick looked at the view screen. For a long moment, his ancient brain could not process what his compound eyes were seeing. A city spread across the landscape below. Buildings, roads, factories with smokestacks releasing plumes of smoke. Electrical lights glittering even in daylight. Green areas that could only be farms. Green areas that could only be areas, redundant areas that could only... And something that looked very much like a spaceport. "Impossible," Ketherick whispered. "This is impossible." He ordered his fleet to land near the spaceport. 20 ships descended in formation, weapons charged and ready. Whatever tricks the humans had managed, they would not resist Vethkai military power. Commander Vasquez was waiting for them. He stood at the edge of the landing area with an honor guard of 50 humans. They wore uniforms of woven fabric, neat and professional. They carried weapons made of polished metal. They did not look like survivors. They looked like victors. Ketherick descended from his ship, flanked by soldiers. He approached the human commander slowly, his compound eyes scanning everything. The buildings, the roads, the power lines, the massive factories in the distance. All of it built in 1 year. All of it built from nothing. "Welcome back to Meridian 7, Overseer," Vasquez said. His voice was calm and pleasant, as if greeting an old friend. "As you can see, we've made some improvements." "How?" Ketherick demanded. His translator struggled to convey the shock in his clicking voice. "You had no resources, no technology. You had nothing. We had knowledge," Vasquez replied. "We had human minds and human hands. We had 10,000 years of learning stored in our memories." He gestured at the city around them. "This is what humans do when you give us a problem to solve." Ketherick looked at the city again. His species had traveled the stars for 100,000 years. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. They had never seen anything like this. "I will show you what we have built," Vasquez said. "If you are willing to look." Ketherick nodded slowly. He needed to understand this. He needed to know how these soft creatures had done the impossible. Vasquez led him on a tour. They walked through factories where machines cut metal with perfect precision. They visited laboratories where scientists worked on projects that Ketherick could barely understand. They saw farms producing food in quantities that exceeded what the colony needed. And finally, they arrived at the spaceport. A ship sat on the landing pad. It was small and strange, its design unlike anything in the Galactic Registry. Its hull gleamed with alloys that Ketherick did not recognize. "We studied the wreckage of our old vessels before you took them," Dr. Tanaka explained. She had joined them for this part of the tour. "We understood the principles. Then we improved them." "Improved?" Ketherick repeated. "This drive system is 43% more efficient than anything in current galactic use," she said. "Our power systems are smaller and more stable. Our hull materials are stronger and lighter. In 1 year, with no resources and no help, we have created technology that surpasses the Vethkai Empire." Ketherick stared at the ship. His mandibles clicked in patterns that his translator could not interpret. The Vethkai had stopped improving 100,000 years ago. They had found technology that worked and saw no reason to make it better. Why change something that already succeeded? Why risk failure when you could simply repeat success? But humans were different. Humans were never satisfied. Humans looked at something that worked and asked how to make it work better. They took problems and turned them into opportunities. They took disasters and turned them into fuel for growth. What do you want? Kethrix finally asked. Vasquez considered the question. Around him stood 3,000 humans who had refused to die, who had reached back through history and pulled forward every lesson their ancestors had learned, who had compressed centuries of development into months through nothing but determination and intelligence. We want you to take a message back to your empire, Vasquez said. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them that you can take everything from humanity, our resources, our technology, our homes, and we will build it all back, better, stronger, superior. He stepped closer to the overseer. His eyes met the alien's compound gaze without fear, because that is what humans do. We adapt, we overcome, we improve. You cannot destroy us by taking our tools. You can only make us angry enough to build better ones. He looked up at the sky where the Vethkai fleet hung in orbit. If you ever threaten our people again, Vasquez continued, we will not just survive. We will surpass you in ways your stagnant empire cannot imagine. This colony was just the beginning. We have sent messages to Earth and every human world. They know what happened here. They know what we achieved. And they are already asking themselves, if we can do this with nothing, what could we do with everything? Kethrix was silent for a long time. He looked at the city. He looked at the ship. He looked at the humans standing proud and unafraid. For the first time in his ancient life, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear. I will deliver your message, he said quietly. He returned to his ship without another word. His fleet lifted off and disappeared into the sky. Kethrix sat alone in his quarters, composing a report that would shake the foundations of the empire. The humans had been meant to die. They had been meant to prove that no species could survive without technology. Instead, they had proven something far more dangerous. They had proven that taking everything from a human was not a way to destroy them. It was a way to unleash them. Back on Meridian 7, Kale Vasquez watched the alien ships vanish. Dr. Tanaka stood beside him, along with Chamnan, Marcus, and Elena, and all the others who had made this miracle possible. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? Dr. Tanaka asked. Kale shook his head. No, they'll be back. But next time, they won't come to punish us. They'll come because they're afraid of what we might become. He looked at his people. Farmers who had become engineers. Scientists who had become inventors. Children who had grown up in a single year, watching their parents rebuild a civilization with their bare hands. Let them be afraid, Kale said. Let the whole galaxy be afraid. Because they should be. Humanity is awake now. And we're just getting started. He walked back toward the city, toward the workshops and laboratories and factories where his people were already working on the next generation of improvements. The Vethkai had meant to teach humanity a lesson about power. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy something far more important. You should never, ever give humans a reason to try harder.